The stars should have been beautiful. I used to think of them that way. Tiny lanterns scattered across an endless sea, each one a promise that somewhere life endured. But tonight, looking out from the deck of our ship, they don't feel like promises. They feel like eyes, watching, waiting. I'm not the only one who feels it. The crew has grown restless these past weeks. We don't joke anymore. We don't sing in the mess hall. Even the sound of footsteps in the corridor feels heavier, slower, as if everyone is trying not to draw attention, as if something is listening. We're far from Earth now, deeper than any human fleet has dared to travel. Our mission was exploration, find a new frontier, a planet untouched, maybe a home worth claiming. Command called it Operation Dawnspark. Beautiful name. It made people back home cheer, made investors pour billions into the fleet, made soldiers like me believe we were building history. But history doesn't feel like this. History doesn't creep at the back of your neck when you stare into the void. The USS Meridian had been my home for 8 months now. A Titan-class exploration vessel, she was one of humanity's finest achievements, self-sustaining, heavily armed, and capable of traveling distances that would have been unimaginable just decades ago. Her crew of 300 represented the best and brightest from across human space. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, explorers, all united by the dream of expanding humanity's reach into the unknown. Captain Miranda Hayes commanded with quiet efficiency. She'd served on the frontier for 20 years, longer than anyone else in the fleet. Her gray eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd seen the universe's wonders and terrors in equal measure. When she spoke, people listened. When she gave orders, they were followed without question. "Sergeant Marcus Chen," she'd said when I first reported aboard, "your file makes for interesting reading. Decorated veteran of the Outer Colony Wars, expert in xenobiology, and according to your psychological profile, someone who thrives in impossible situations." "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet. We're heading into uncharted space, Sergeant. If the theories are correct, we're about to make first contact with intelligences beyond human understanding. I need soldiers who can think as well as fight. I'd thought I was ready for anything. 6 years of military service had shown me the best and worst of humanity. I'd fought raiders in the asteroid belts, helped evacuate colonies from natural disasters, even served as part of the honor guard for diplomatic missions to the few alien species we'd encountered, peaceful traders and explorers like ourselves. Nothing had prepared me for what we found in the darkness between stars. It began a month ago, when the first scout ship vanished. The Pioneer had been conducting a routine survey of an unexplored system when communications went dark. No distress call, no wreckage, no radiation signature, just gone. Probably a navigation malfunction, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reyes had suggested during the briefing. Long-range sensors show high electromagnetic interference in that sector. Could have knocked out their communication array. Command accepted the explanation because it was rational, because it fit with known science. The universe was vast and dangerous enough without imagining new threats. But then the Explorer disappeared, then the Vanguard. Each time, the last message was the same. Silence, not even static. By the time the 10th ship went dark, Command stopped sending scouts altogether. They ordered the fleet to advance as one. "Strength in numbers," Admiral Harrison announced via fleet-wide transmission. "Whatever's causing these disappearances, we'll face it together." But even 1,000 ships still feel small when you're surrounded by an infinite black. I started noticing things during the night shifts. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, long hours, constant drills, endless briefings about contingency protocols. But no, others noticed too. Chief Petty Officer Liu mentioned it first during a routine equipment check. "Sergeant, have you been having strange dreams lately?" "What kind of strange?" "About shapes, moving in the dark between the stars. Things that shouldn't exist but somehow do." I hadn't told anyone about my own dreams, but Liu's words sent a chill down my spine. Because I had been seeing things, not just in sleep, but during the quiet moments between duties, when I stared out through the observation ports into the void. Out there between the stars there were shapes. Not ships, not asteroids. just hints of something vast, darker than the darkness itself. Whenever I looked too long, my eyes watered, my chest tightened, and when I blinked, the after-images burned against my retinas like brands. Dr. Elena Vasquez, our chief xenobiologist, was the first to document the phenomenon scientifically. She called it persistent visual hallucination syndrome, though her clinical terminology couldn't hide the fear in her voice when she briefed Captain Hayes. The symptoms are consistent across 40% of the crew, she reported. Shared visual experiences, sleep disturbances, heightened anxiety levels. But here's what's troubling. The hallucinations are too consistent. If this were a psychological disorder, we'd expect more variation in the reported experiences. What are you suggesting, Doctor? That we might be seeing something real? You don't understand. It's not like memory or imagination. It's like the images are burned into the inside of my skull. Skeletal silhouettes stretching across the void, limbs too long, torsos rippling like liquid shadow, and eyes, gods, their eyes. They don't glow, they don't shine, but I feel them, pressing against me, boring into me even when I shut my lids tight. Some of the crew started describing the same visions. Maintenance Chief Rodriguez spoke of living darkness that moved between the hull sections during his repair work. Navigator Patricia Wong reported seeing geometric impossibilities in her star charts, patterns that shouldn't exist but somehow made perfect sense. That's when I knew it wasn't just me. We were seeing something real, something out there, something that wanted to be seen. Command told us not to spread panic. Hallucinations, they said, psychological stress. They even ordered medical screenings, brought in specialists from the fleet's medical division. Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a renowned neurologist, spent weeks examining crew members, running every test known to medical science. His final report was classified, but I heard fragments through the rumor mill. No evidence of neurological disorder, brain chemistry within normal parameters. However, the electrical activity patterns are unprecedented, as if something external is influencing neural pathways. But no scan, no test, no drug could erase what we saw. The more we tried to ignore it, the clearer the visions became. Last week, we found a planet. That should have been cause for celebration, but the moment we entered orbit, I knew we had made a mistake. The world hung in space like a diseased eye, its surface a patchwork of impossible colors that hurt to look at directly. Long-range scans revealed continents and oceans, but wrong somehow, as if the very geography was an insult to natural law. Atmospheric composition is unusual, reported Chief Science Officer David Park. His voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. Oxygen-nitrogen mix within tolerable ranges, but there are compounds present that don't appear in any database. Organic molecules that shouldn't be stable under these conditions. The surface looked wrong. Seas that weren't seas, just black liquid swallowing the light. Mountains that seemed to bend, leaning as if they were listening. Even the clouds twisted unnaturally, coiling into shapes that resembled the same creatures in our visions. And then we saw them, moving along the ground. The first confirmed sighting came from Ensign Thomas Bradley, a young officer barely 6 months out of the academy. He was manning the primary sensor array when he detected movement in what appeared to be a valley system on the planet's largest continent. "Captain," his voice shook as he made the report. "I'm reading multiple biological signatures on the surface. Large organisms, highly mobile. They're moving in patterns." Captain Hayes joined him at the sensor station, her expression grim. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a magnified view of the planet's surface. At first it looked empty, just barren landscape under an alien sky. Then the shapes began to move. I can't even call them animals. They were nightmares given flesh. Their bodies shifted between forms, like their bones couldn't decide where they belonged. Their skin wasn't skin at all, but a translucent membrane rippling with colors I had no name for. Colors that made my head ache when I tried to focus. The worst part? When we blinked, they didn't disappear. Do you know what it feels like to see something even when your eyes are closed? To rub them raw, to press your palms so hard against your sockets that stars burst behind your vision, and still the creatures remain? They were burned into us, carved deep into the folds of our brains. Ensign Bradley broke down right there on the bridge. He clawed at his face until his fingernails cracked, screaming that he couldn't get them out, couldn't stop seeing them. He begged us to blind him. Security had to restrain him while Dr. Vasquez administered sedatives. We never saw him again. Captain Hayes ordered him transferred to medical isolation. But when I checked the patient roster days later, his name wasn't listed. When I asked about him, I was told he'd been reassigned to another vessel. I don't think blindness would have helped anyway. We should have left then. Every instinct, every rational thought, every fiber of survival sense screamed at us to turn around and flee. But the order came down from Admiral Harrison himself. Landfall. Establish a base, collect samples, prove humanity's claim to this system. So we descended. The shuttle bay of the Meridian had never felt so much like a tomb. 40 Marines in full combat gear stood at attention, their faces hidden behind tactical visors. But I could feel their fear. It radiated from them like heat from a reactor core. "This is a routine scientific expedition," Captain Hayes announced, though her words carried no conviction. "You will establish a perimeter, protect the science teams, and maintain constant communication with the ship. First sign of trouble, you extract immediately." But we all knew there would be no extraction from whatever waited below. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, barely. Each inhalation tasted of copper and decay, as if the very air was contaminated with something that defied analysis. Our environmental suits provided some filtration, but the smell seemed to seep through anyway, settling in our lungs like poison. The air was heavy, thick, damp, metallic. Every breath tasted like rust. We set up perimeter lights, but they barely pierced the gloom. The gravity was Earth normal, but everything felt wrong. The way sound carried, the way light bent, the way shadows fell at impossible angles. Dr. Park's geological team immediately began taking readings. "The mineral composition is unprecedented," he reported via comm. "Silicon-based structures, but arranged in patterns that shouldn't occur naturally. It's as if the entire planet's crust has been reorganized." Meanwhile, Dr. Vasquez focused on the biological samples. What she found defied every principle of evolutionary biology. "These organisms don't follow any known genetic pattern," she transmitted back to the ship. "Their cellular structure is completely alien, but somehow familiar. As if they're based on life forms I should recognize but don't." The creatures didn't attack at first. They only watched from the edges of our camp, their limbs folding and unfolding in ways that made my stomach twist. Some whispered that they were intelligent. Others said they were just animals. But animals don't wait. Animals don't study you with eyes that feel older than suns. Private Sarah Martinez was the first to report direct contact. She was manning the eastern perimeter when one of the creatures approached her position. Her comm chatter started normal enough. "Contact bearing 095, approximately 50 meters out. Single entity, moving slowly." Then her voice changed, becoming dreamy, almost hypnotized. It's looking at me. Really looking at me. Like it knows who I am. Like it's been waiting for me specifically." "Martinez, maintain distance and report," Sergeant Foster ordered. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "The way it moves, the colors under its skin, they're like music made visible. Why were we afraid of something so beautiful?" That's when we lost her signal. We found Martinez an hour later, still standing at her post, staring at empty space. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, but she was breathing and responsive. When we tried to move her, she resisted. "They're still here," she insisted. "Can't you see them? They're dancing. They want us to dance with them." Dr. Vasquez ran every neurological test available in the field. Martinez's brain activity was unlike anything in the medical databases, hyperactive in some regions, completely dormant in others, as if parts of her mind had been replaced. On the third night, they moved closer. At first, just one, taller than any man, its body swaying as if the ground beneath it shifted. It made no sound, no movement toward us. But when the floodlights struck its form, I swear the shadows bent around it, wrapping it like a cloak. Then there were 10, then 100. A ring of horrors surrounding our camp, their forms flickering in and out of the corner of our vision. And when we blinked, yes, they remained, always there. The creatures were unlike anything in our databases or evolutionary theories. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested intelligence, but their anatomy defied physics. Limbs that bent in too many directions, skin that seemed to exist in more dimensions than our eyes could process, faces that were almost human but wrong in every fundamental way. Lieutenant James Walker, our xenobiology specialist, tried to document them with his recording equipment. "They're not solid," he reported, his voice filled with scientific confusion. "The scanners read them as partially existing in normal space, but part of their mass seems to extend into somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" Captain Hayes's voice crackled through the comm. "Another dimension, maybe? I don't know. The math doesn't work. According to our instruments, they shouldn't be able to exist at all." Panic spread through the camp like wildfire. Some soldiers fired without orders. Plasma bolts lit the night, tearing chunks from the earth. The creatures didn't flinch. The bolts passed through some, burned against others, but nothing killed them. It was like shooting into smoke made solid. Worse, the weapons fire seemed to excite them. Their movements became more animated, more playful. They began to mimic our actions, pointing imaginary weapons at each other and making sounds that might have been laughter. Command tried to maintain order, but fear had already done its work. Soldiers abandoned their posts. Scientists destroyed their own equipment rather than let it fall into alien hands, and our carefully planned expedition devolved into chaos. That was the night the war began. Not a war of politics or resources, not a war we chose, a war born from the moment we set foot on a planet that should never have been touched. I don't know if you can imagine what it feels like to fight something you can't look away from, something you can't forget. Every blast, every scream, every flash of light only made their forms sharper in my mind. And the more we fought, the more I realized we were feeding them. The evacuation from the planet's surface was a nightmare of confusion and terror. Half our equipment was left behind, along with 3 Marines who had simply disappeared. Not killed, not captured. They had walked into the darkness surrounding our camp and never returned. Back aboard the Meridian, Captain Hayes ordered a full quarantine. Anyone who had been on the surface was isolated for medical examination. Dr. Vasquez worked around the clock, running test after test, searching for some explanation for what we'd encountered. "The biological samples are impossible," she reported during an emergency briefing. "They show characteristics of both organic and inorganic matter. Some cellular structures appear to be crystalline, others are purely energy-based. It's as if these creatures exist at the intersection of matter and something else." "Something else being what, Doctor?" Hayes asked. "I don't know. The closest analogy I can make is that they exist partially in our reality and partially in elsewhere, like living equations that have somehow achieved consciousness." But the real horror began when the visions started spreading to crew members who had never been on the planet's surface. Engineer Paula Santos was the first. She'd been working on routine maintenance in the engine bay when she began describing the same creatures the ground team had seen. Her description was so accurate, so detailed, that initially we thought she'd somehow accessed classified mission reports. But Santos had been confined to the engineering decks since the landing party's return. She'd had no contact with the surface team, no access to their reports. Yet she could describe every detail of the creature's appearance, down to the way their skin rippled with impossible colors. "They're in the walls," she told Dr. Vasquez during her examination. "I can hear them moving through the ship's superstructure. They're looking for something, or someone." Within days, similar reports came from across the ship. Maintenance workers reported seeing shapes moving through the ventilation systems. Bridge officers described shadows at the edge of their vision during routine duties. Even crew members in the most secure areas of the ship began experiencing the same shared hallucinations. Dr. Vasquez's medical reports grew increasingly desperate. The visions are spreading through the crew with no apparent vector. It's not airborne, not transmitted through contact, not related to any known pathogen. It's as if the information itself is contagious. The command staff held emergency meetings behind closed doors. I wasn't privy to most of their discussions, but fragments leaked through the rumor mill. Talk of mimetic hazards and cognitive contamination, speculation that we'd encountered something that existed primarily as information, as living thought that could reproduce itself in human minds. Captain Hayes grew haggard. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hands shook slightly during briefings. When Lieutenant Commander Reyes asked if she was experiencing the visions too, Hayes's silence was answer enough. All personnel are to report any unusual visual experiences immediately, she announced via ship-wide communication. This is not a request. Failure to report symptoms will be considered dereliction of duty. But how do you report something that defies description? How do you file a formal incident report about creatures that shouldn't exist, seen by eyes that are simultaneously open and closed? The ship's psychiatrist, Dr. Michael Chen, tried to establish therapy groups for affected crew members, but the sessions only made things worse. When people compared their experiences, the visions became stronger, more vivid. It was as if the act of sharing the impossible made it more real. We need to get away from this system, Dr. Chen recommended during a senior staff meeting I was allowed to attend due to my security clearance. Whatever's happening to the crew, distance might break the connection. Negative, Hayes replied. Our orders are to maintain position and gather intelligence. Admiral Harrison was very specific. We don't abandon a system without understanding what we're facing. Captain, with respect, we're losing the crew. Half of them are experiencing severe psychological disturbances. If this continues, we'll have a ship full of people who can't distinguish between reality and hallucination. Then it's your job to help them make that distinction, Doctor. But the war didn't start with that planet. That was just where we finally understood what we were facing. But the real beginning, the moment humanity stepped into something far older than our small civilization, happened 3 years earlier, when we were still foolish enough to believe the universe was ours to claim. I was younger then, eager, part of the Deep Space Exploration Corps, convinced that every star system we mapped brought us closer to immortality. We'd been pushing further into the void for decades, establishing trade routes, mining operations, research stations. Humanity was spreading like wildfire across the galaxy, and we thought that made us powerful. We should have paid attention to what we found in the dark between the stars. The first sign came from Sector 47, a region so remote that our navigation computers had to estimate coordinates. A mining vessel, the Steadfast, had detected unusual metallic signatures drifting in the void. Not asteroids, the readings were too uniform, too geometric. The Steadfast's captain, Maria Rodriguez, was a veteran of 30 years in deep space. She'd seen everything the galaxy had to offer: rogue planets, stellar anomalies, even the occasional derelict ship from humanity's early expansion period. But her transmission to command carried an edge of unease I'd never heard in her voice before. The objects are artificial, no question about that, but they're not like anything in our databases. The construction materials appear to be some kind of biometallic composite. And the age? Preliminary dating suggests these structures are millions of years old. When they sent back the initial scans, Command's excitement was infectious. Artificial structures meant alien technology. Alien technology meant advancement. Advancement meant profit. I was assigned to the follow-up expedition aboard the Meridian. 12 ships, 300 crew members, enough firepower to level a small moon. We thought we were prepared for anything. The structures were enormous. I'm talking about constructs the size of cities, floating in the emptiness between star systems. They weren't built. They looked grown, like massive bones bleached by cosmic radiation. Their surfaces were smooth, almost organic, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Spirals within spirals, geometric forms that seemed to shift when you weren't watching. Our xenobiologist, Dr. Chen, spent hours analyzing the external hull. She kept muttering about impossible architecture, about angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. When she finally looked up from her scanner, her face had gone pale. "These structures are older than our solar system," she whispered. "The metal composition, it predates known stellar formation." The implications were staggering. These weren't just alien artifacts. They were relics from a time before most of the galaxy's current star systems had even formed. Whatever civilization had built them had been exploring space when humanity's ancestors were still microscopic organisms in Earth's primordial oceans. Captain Morrison ordered a boarding party. Standard protocol: 6 soldiers, 2 scientists, full environmental suits. I volunteered, of course. Adventure called to young fools like me. The moment we breached the hull, I knew we had made a mistake. The air inside was breathable. Somehow our atmosphere, perfectly balanced oxygen and nitrogen. But it felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Every footstep echoed endlessly through corridors that stretched beyond our helmet lights. The interior architecture defied every principle of engineering I'd learned. Corridors branched at impossible angles, leading to chambers that seemed larger inside than the external structure could accommodate. Gravity was inconsistent. Sometimes we walked on walls, sometimes on ceilings, without any sense of transition. The walls were covered in symbols, not carved or painted, but embedded, as if the metal itself had grown around them. They seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, shifting colors that made my vision blur. When I tried to focus on individual markings, my head began to throb. "Command, are you getting this?" I radioed back to the ship. "The interior structure is extensive, possibly inhabited." Static answered me. Then Morrison's voice, distorted and distant. "Negative, Sergeant. We're reading interference. Can you repeat?" But I hadn't heard interference. I'd heard something else underneath the static. Something that sounded almost like children singing. Dr. Sarah Kim, our xenoarchaeologist, was documenting everything with barely contained excitement. These symbols, they're not just decorative, they're functional. Some kind of information storage system, maybe even a form of consciousness preservation. "Consciousness preservation?" I asked. "Think of it as a library where the books are alive. These markings might contain the actual thoughts and memories of whoever built this place." The idea sent chills down my spine. We weren't just exploring an abandoned structure. We were walking through the preserved minds of beings who had died millions of years ago. We pressed deeper into the structure. The corridors branched and twisted, sometimes opening into vast chambers that disappeared into darkness above and below. In one room, we found what looked like pods. Hundreds of them, arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Each was roughly the size of a human body, made from the same bone-white material as the walls. Dr. Chen ran her scanner over the nearest pod. "Empty," she reported, "but there are residual biosignatures. Whatever was inside these, it was alive. Recently." "How recently?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Within the last few years. Maybe months." The implications hit me like a physical blow. These ancient structures weren't as abandoned as we'd thought. Something was still using them. Something that had awakened when we began exploring this region of space. That's when Corporal Davis found the viewing chamber. It was a circular room with walls of transparent material, offering a perfect view of the void outside. But when we looked out, we didn't see our ships. We didn't see stars. We saw other structures, dozens of them, stretching away into the darkness like a vast cemetery of alien architecture. And they were all empty. "How many ships did we bring?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 12, Dr. Chen replied, her voice tight with growing panic. I counted the structures visible through the transparent wall. 43 massive constructs, each one capable of housing thousands of beings. "They're all empty," Davis whispered. "Where did they all go?" That's when we heard it clearly for the first time, not buried in static, not just at the edge of hearing. Voices, children's voices, singing a lullaby in a language that predated human speech. The sound came from everywhere at once. The walls, the floor, the very air around us. But these weren't the voices of children as we understood them. There was something ancient in the harmonies, something that spoke of vast intelligence and terrible patience. The lullaby was beautiful and horrifying in equal measure, a song that promised rest while threatening eternal slumber. We ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. 3 soldiers and 2 scientists sprinting through alien corridors like children fleeing a nightmare. The singing followed us, growing louder, more insistent. Other sounds joined it, laughter that wasn't quite human, whispers in languages that made my teeth ache. When we reached our entry point, the breach we'd cut in the hull had sealed itself. "Impossible," Dr. Chen gasped, running her hands over perfectly smooth metal. "The molecular structure, it's repairing itself." The singing stopped. In the sudden silence, we heard breathing that wasn't ours. Morrison's voice crackled through our comms. "Boarding party report. We're detecting massive power fluctuations from the structure. You need to evacuate immediately." But there was no evacuation. The walls around us began to glow with that same pulsing light, and the symbols embedded in the metal started to move, rearranging themselves into new patterns, new meanings. And then we saw them. They didn't appear. They revealed themselves, as if they'd been there all along, just slightly outside our perception. Children, but not children. Human-shaped, but wrong in every detail. Their limbs were too long, their joints bent at impossible angles. Their skin was translucent, showing networks of veins that pulsed with dark fluid. And their eyes were ancient, filled with intelligence that predated the birth of stars. They stood in the corridors, in the chambers, filling every space we had explored. Dozens of them, hundreds, all perfectly silent, all watching us with those terrible knowing eyes. The youngest-looking one, barely the size of a human child, tilted its head and smiled. When it opened its mouth, the voice that emerged was ancient and vast. "You found our homes. We've been waiting so long for someone to play with." I don't remember how we escaped. I have fragments. Davis screaming as something touched his mind. Dr. Chen collapsing as visions flooded her consciousness. The hull suddenly opening like a mouth to release us back into space. Our shuttle's engines firing at maximum burn, racing back to the meridian, while shapes moved in the darkness behind us. The debrief was classified immediately. Captain Morrison sealed all records, transferred the survivors to different divisions. They told us it was mass hallucination, shared psychosis brought on by alien environments. They had explanations for everything. But explanations don't erase what we saw. They don't stop the dreams. Dr. Chen never fully recovered. She spent weeks in the medical bay, muttering about preserved consciousness and living memories. The official report listed her condition as acute stress reaction, but I knew better. She'd touched something in that ancient structure, something that had marked her permanently. Davis disappeared entirely. One day he was in medical isolation. The next, his quarters were empty, and his name was struck from the crew roster. When I asked about him, I was told he'd been transferred for specialized treatment. I never saw him again. And Dr. Kim started drawing, compulsively, obsessively, filling page after page with symbols that matched those we'd seen in the alien structure. She claimed she couldn't stop, that the images were flowing through her, like water through a broken dam. Within a month, similar reports began flooding in from across the frontier. Structures appearing in deep space, crews experiencing shared visions, personnel vanishing without trace. The pattern was always the same: discovery, investigation, contact with something that called itself the children. But the children weren't just ancient inhabitants of dead structures. They were something more, something that existed at the intersection of consciousness and reality itself. Our alien allies, The Zenthari Confederation, the Helix Collective, began sending desperate messages. Their deep space explorers were encountering the same phenomena. Ancient structures, empty homes, waiting inhabitants that existed just outside normal perception. Ambassador Kethvol of the Zenthari requested an emergency meeting with Human Command. I wasn't present, but the recording was leaked months later. His translator struggled with concepts that had no equivalent in human language. Your species has awakened something that should have remained sleeping. The old warnings speak of the Voidborn, children of the dark between stars. They existed before light, before matter took its current form. When the first suns died, they were born from that darkness, and they have waited ever since for new life to emerge. Waited for what? Admiral Hayes had asked. To play, Kethvol replied. They are children after all. But their games end only when their toys break completely. The Zenthari had their own ancient records, fragments of data preserved from civilizations that had vanished millions of years ago. According to their archives, the Voidborn appeared whenever a species reached a certain level of technological development, specifically when they began to explore the spaces between stars in earnest. They are not malevolent in the way you understand evil, Kethvol explained. They are children who have been alone for eons, delighted to find new friends to play with. But children can be careless with their toys. The children of the void fed on consciousness itself, on the electrical patterns that made up thought and memory. They didn't destroy minds so much as absorb them, add them to their own collective existence. Every being they encountered became part of their vast, distributed intelligence. That was 6 months before the first human colony vanished. 8 months before entire fleets began disappearing without distress calls. A year before, we realized that first contact hadn't been an accident. It had been an invitation. The children of the void weren't invading our space. They were revealing that it had always been theirs. The greatest military force in galactic history assembled at Kepler Station 3 months after the first colony disappeared. 5,000 ships from 7 different species, representing every major civilization in known space. Humanity brought our newest dreadnoughts. The Zenthari contributed their phase cannon destroyers. The Helix Collective deployed their living bioships that could regenerate battle damage in real time. We called it the Grand Armada. Looking back, I realized we were already dead. We just hadn't stopped breathing yet. I was aboard the UES Retribution, flagship of the human contingent. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the bridge during our final briefing, her jaw set with the kind of determination that had carried humanity to the stars. Behind her, the massive viewscreen displayed tactical projections and fleet formations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were looking at elaborate funeral arrangements. Intelligence suggests the enemy operates from 47 structures scattered across deep space, she announced to the assembled fleet commanders via holographic link. Our strategy is simple. Coordinated strikes, overwhelming firepower, systematic elimination of each target. The briefing room buzzed with the quiet confidence of military professionals. These were beings who had fought in dozens of conflicts, who understood the mathematics of war. They spoke of tonnage and firepower, of tactical advantages and strategic objectives. None of them understood what we were really facing. Admiral Vexthon of the Zenthari leaned forward in his holographic projection, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Admiral Cross, our scouts report that these children do not appear to possess conventional technology. No ships, no weapons platforms, no defensive systems we can identify. Then this should be straightforward, Cross replied. We hit hard, we hit fast, we eliminate the threat. But Commander Siles of the Helix Collective raised what I thought was a crucial point. What if they want us to find them? What if this is exactly what they hoped we would do? The question hung in the air for a moment before Admiral Cross dismissed it with military confidence. Regardless of their intentions, a concentrated assault will end this. We have overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. She was right about the numbers. She was wrong about everything else. The first target was Structure 7 Alpha, the same bone-white construct where I'd first encountered the children. As we approached, the entire armada spread into attack formation, a sphere of destruction with enough firepower to crack a moon. Sensors showed the structure exactly as I remembered, massive, ancient, apparently defenseless. "All units, commence bombardment," Cross commanded. 5,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. The light was brilliant, beautiful even. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion torpedoes, Xanthari phase disruptors, helix bioacids. Every weapon humanity and its allies had perfected over centuries of warfare. The structure vanished in a sphere of incandescent energy that outshone nearby stars. For 30 seconds we celebrated. Crews cheered, commanders congratulated each other, politicians prepared victory speeches. The threat was contained. Civilization had triumphed. Then the light faded, and the structure remained completely untouched. "Impossible," Cross whispered, staring at sensor readings that showed no damage whatsoever. Concentrated fire from 5,000 ships. There should be nothing left. That's when we heard the laughter. It came through our communication systems, through our hull plating, through the very air we breathed. Children's laughter, delighted and pleased, as if we'd just performed a wonderful trick for their entertainment. "Again! Again!" The voice was young, innocent, terrifyingly joyful. "Do it again!" That was fun. Admiral Cross, to her credit, maintained composure for exactly 15 seconds. Then she gave the order that doomed us all. "All units, prepare for second bombardment. Focus fire on dash dash." The structure moved. I don't mean it traveled through space. I mean it shifted, folded, rearranged itself like origami made from living bone. Sections that had been solid became transparent. Surfaces that had been smooth sprouted massive tendrils, and from every opening emerged the children. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They poured out of the structure like water from a burst dam, but they moved through the vacuum of space as if it were air. No suits, no ships, no protection against the cold and radiation that should have killed any living thing instantly. They swam through space toward our fleet, their two long limbs propelling them with impossible grace. And as they approached, our weapons began to malfunction, not break down. That would have been understandable. Instead, they transformed. Plasma cannons started firing flower petals that drifted harmlessly through space. Missile launchers released flocks of mechanical birds that sang in harmonies that made our crews weep. The Xanthari phase disruptors began projecting images of childhood memories. Alien children at play, human children laughing. Memories of innocence from species we'd never encountered. "What's happening to our systems?" Cross demanded of her technical officer. "Unknown, Admiral. All weapons are functioning normally according to diagnostics, but their output..." Lieutenant Torres shook his head in confusion. "The molecular structure of our ammunition is changing at the point of discharge. Plasma is becoming organic matter. Metals are transforming into biological compounds." The children reached our outer perimeter ships. I watched through the view screen as they surrounded the Xanthari destroyer Honor's Edge. They didn't attack. They played. Some of them pressed their faces against the hull, their breath fogging the metal. Others began to stroke the ship's surface with gentle, almost loving touches. The Honor's Edge began to change. Its hull softened, becoming pliable like clay. The rigid military angles flowed into organic curves. Weapon ports reshaped themselves into what looked like eyes, and the ship's communications array extended like reaching arms. "Honor's Edge, report status," Cross commanded. The response came in Admiral Vexthon's voice, but wrong, higher-pitched, giggling. "We're playing house, Admiral. The nice children are showing us how to be toys. It's wonderful. Come join us." "Vexthon, maintain battle discipline. You're ordered to withdraw immediately." But the Honor's Edge was no longer capable of withdrawal. Its engines had become something else. Organs that pulsed with bioluminescent fluid, propelling the transformed ship in lazy spirals while the children rode on its hull like amusement park attractions. The infection spread like a virus through our formation. Ship after ship fell under the children's influence, their crews broadcasting increasingly bizarre reports. Some claimed their vessels were now alive and singing. Others insisted they'd been invited to tea parties in dimensions that folded through the ship's cargo holds. The bioships of the Helix Collective suffered worst of all. Their living hulls proved desperately eager to play with the children, transforming into creatures that defied every law of biology. I watched the synthesis grow wings of crystalline bone, its crew visible through transparent sections, waving happily at anyone who looked their way. "All units, fall back to defensive positions," Cross ordered. "Form a protective shell around the command vessels." But falling back meant nothing when space itself was becoming unstable. The void between ships began to ripple like water, and through those ripples stepped more children, not hundreds now, but millions. They emerged from tears in reality, from shadows that existed in 4 dimensions, from the dark spaces between atoms. And they all wanted to play. The retribution shuddered as something enormous pressed against our hull. Through the reinforced windows of the bridge, I saw a face, if you could call it that. Childlike features stretched across a head the size of a shuttlecraft, eyes that contained swirling galaxies, a mouth that smiled with too many teeth made from crystallized starlight. "Hello," it said, and its voice resonated through the ship's superstructure. "You have such a pretty boat. Can we make it better?" Our weapon systems activated without command input. But instead of firing outward, they turned inward, plasma bolts carving decorative patterns in our own corridors. The patterns were beautiful, geometric flowers that bloomed across bulkheads, spiral designs that led the eye deeper into impossible dimensions. "Admiral," I reported, trying to keep panic from my voice, "internal defensive systems have been compromised. The children are redecorating." Cross slammed her fist against the command console. "Engineering, emergency shutdown of all weapon systems." "Already tried, Admiral," came the reply from Chief Engineer Martinez. "The systems aren't responding to shutdown protocols. It's like they're alive now, making their own decisions." Through the view screen, I watched our mighty armada transform into something from a fever dream. Ships became toys, weapons became art projects, and our crews became willing participants in games that followed no earthly rules. The UES Sovereign had been converted into what looked like a massive rocking horse, complete with a mane made from its own sensor arrays. Its crew were broadcasting nursery rhymes in 17 different languages. The Zenthari flagship, Cosmic Razor, now resembled a child's drawing of a spaceship, all bright colors and impossible proportions, with crew members visible through transparent sections, waving happily at anyone who looked their way. But not everyone was playing willingly. "Admiral, we're receiving emergency transmissions from multiple vessels," Communications Officer Park reported. "Some crew members are reporting casualties." "Casualties from what?" "The children aren't attacking." Park's face went pale. "That's just it, ma'am. They're not dying from violence. They're dying from joy. Extreme emotional response leading to cardiac arrest. Some are laughing themselves to death. Others are crying tears of such happiness that they're dehydrating." She paused, listening to her earpiece. "And some are asking to be allowed to join the children permanently. They say they never want the games to end." I moved to my own communication station and cycled through the fleet channels. What I heard still haunts me. Grown soldiers giggling like toddlers as their ship's life support systems transformed into carnival rides. Military officers describing the most wonderful experiences of their lives while their vessels disintegrated around them. And underneath it all, that constant sound of children singing lullabies in languages that predated speech. The children's lullabies weren't just sounds. They were living things, viral concepts that rewrote the neural pathways of anyone who heard them. The melodies promised perfect happiness, eternal play, freedom from the burden of adult consciousness. Admiral Cross made the hardest decision of her career. "All units still under our control, implement Protocol Omega. Emergency withdrawal to Rally Point Zulu 7. "Admiral," I said quietly, "that means abandoning nearly 80% of the fleet." "I'm aware of the numbers, Sergeant. Her voice was steady, but I could see the pain in her eyes. We cannot help them. We can only ensure that someone survives to warn the galaxy. As the remaining ships of the Grand Armada began their retreat, I took one last look at the battlefield. The children had converted our mighty war fleet into the galaxy's largest playground. Ships chased each other in elaborate games of tag. Weapon systems had been repurposed into musical instruments, creating a symphony that could be heard across space. And everywhere the children danced and played and laughed with the pure joy of creatures who had found new friends. But there was something else in that laughter now. Something that hadn't been there before. Intelligence. Learning. Adaptation. The children weren't just playing with our technology. They were studying it, understanding it. And as I watched, I saw some of them experimenting with military formations, practicing combat maneuvers, testing weapon systems that they'd transformed but not destroyed. They were learning how to wage war. The defeat at Structure 7 Alpha was just the beginning. Within weeks, the children's influence spread like a plague across inhabited space. But this wasn't conquest in any sense we understood. This was something far worse. They were teaching entire worlds how to play. New Canberra was the first colony to fall completely. Population, 3 million. When the emergency beacon activated, Command sent a rescue fleet expecting to find survivors, maybe signs of battle. Instead, they found a planet transformed into the galaxy's largest nursery. I was part of the reconnaissance team that made planetfall. Captain Miranda Hayes had survived the retreat from Structure 7 Alpha and had been given command of the investigation. Her hair had gone completely gray in the months since the battle, and her eyes held a haunted quality that never quite went away. "Remember," she briefed us before landing, "we're dealing with an enemy that fights by making war seem pointless. Stay focused on the mission. Document everything. Trust nothing you see." The cities were still intact, but wrong. Buildings had been reshaped into impossible geometries, towers that spiraled into themselves, streets that formed massive playgrounds, residential districts converted into elaborate dollhouses where people could be seen through transparent walls, living their daily lives like exhibits. But the people weren't distressed. They were laughing. "Command, this is Recon 7, I reported through comms that crackled with interference. Population appears alive, but altered. We found them in Central Park, which had been transformed into a vast amphitheater. 3 million colonists sat in perfect concentric circles, adults and children alike, all facing the center where dozens of the children performed what looked like a theatrical production. But the performance made no sense. Actors floated through the air, scenes shifted between dimensions, and the story seemed to be told in colors and emotions rather than words. The colonists watched with rapture. Some were weeping with joy. Others clapped with such enthusiasm their hands were bleeding. And when the performance ended, they all spoke in unison. "Thank you for showing us how to play properly." That's when I realized the horrible truth. The children hadn't conquered these people. They had converted them, made them willing participants in games that slowly stripped away everything that made them human. Dr. Sarah Chen from our rescue team ran her scanner over the nearest colonist, a middle-aged man who'd been a factory supervisor before the children arrived. "Neurological activity is off the charts," she whispered. "But the patterns, it's like his brain has been rewired for constant euphoria. The pleasure centers are overloaded." "Sir," the man said to me, his eyes unfocused but blissful, "would you like to join us? The nice children are teaching us such wonderful games. We don't need to sleep anymore, or eat, or worry about silly things like work or money. We just play all day." I asked him about his family. "Oh, they're playing too. Everyone plays now. My wife is learning to be a cloud, and my daughter is practicing how to exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously. It's educational." The children had found something more effective than destruction: addiction. They'd turned an entire planet into willing slaves who begged for more games, more plays, more lessons in how to abandon their humanity. But the truly horrifying part was how it spread. Refugees from New Canberra carried the infection with them. Not a biological plague, but something worse. The memory of perfect happiness. They described the games with such infectious enthusiasm that others began to seek out the children voluntarily. I watched it happen on Kepler Station. A group of survivors from New Canberra were being debriefed when one of them, a young woman named Lisa, started describing her experiences. "You don't understand," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "The children showed us how small we were before, how limited. They taught us to see through walls, to taste music, to feel the heartbeats of distant stars. Every moment was a revelation." Within hours, 3 station personnel had requested transfer to New Canberra. Within days, entire sections of the station were voluntarily shutting down their equipment, saying they'd rather play than work. The infection wasn't biological, it was psychological, existential. The children had weaponized wonder itself. Command tried to quarantine the affected areas, but how do you quarantine an idea? How do you stop people from wanting to be happy? Reports flooded in from across human space. Colony ships changing course mid-flight, their crews claiming they'd received better destinations from helpful voices. Military bases going dark as soldiers abandoned their posts to search for the children. Even on Earth, suicide rates spiked as people who'd heard the refugees' stories decided they'd rather die than live without the perfect joy the children offered. The children didn't just kill, they made you want to die for them. With 17 colonies converted and humanity's population hemorrhaging to voluntary surrender, Command made a decision that would either save us or damn the entire galaxy. Project Starfall, a weapon capable of collapsing a star into a black hole. I was reassigned to the engineering team aboard the Prometheus, humanity's most advanced research vessel. The project consumed every resource we had left. Exotic matter from what remained of the Xanthari Confederation, bio-neural processors salvaged from abandoned Helix collective ships, and computational power that required linking every remaining AI system in human space. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's lead scientist, looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles ringed her eyes as she explained the weapon's function to the assembled team. "Starfall works by destabilizing stellar nucleosynthesis," she said, her voice hoarse. "We inject quantum singularities directly into a star's core. The resulting cascade should create a localized black hole capable of destroying anything within a 3-light-year radius. Including us," added Chief Engineer Rodriguez grimly. The plan was simple in its brutality. Intelligence had identified the largest children concentration around a red giant in the Vale sector. We'd strike there, hoping to eliminate thousands of them in one decisive blow. But command was fractured. Half the leadership wanted to proceed immediately. The other half feared we'd attract something worse. Admiral Cross, survivor of the Grand Armada disaster, led the opposition. "What if they're just the offspring?" she argued during heated strategy sessions. "What if destroying them sends a signal to whatever gave birth to them?" General Morrison, now Supreme Military Commander, dismissed her concerns. "We're losing this war one smile at a time, Admiral. Every day we delay, more colonies join them voluntarily. We need a victory." I found myself torn between both positions. In my quarters, I could hear the whispers, faint voices of the children calling across space, promising games and wonder. Even I wasn't immune to their influence. The breakthrough came when our quantum engineers detected something unprecedented. The children's structures weren't just floating in space, they were connected. Subspace filaments linked every construct across the galaxy, creating a vast neural network. They're not individuals, Dr. Vasquez realized. They're all part of something larger. A distributed consciousness. That changed everything. Starfall wouldn't just kill children in the target zone, it would sever neural connections across their entire network. We might be able to disrupt their collective intelligence, buying humanity time to regroup. The weapon was deployed on a Tuesday. I watched from the Prometheus's observation deck as our modified torpedo streaked toward the red giant. The star pulsed once, twice, then collapsed into a point of absolute darkness. The light show was spectacular. Stellar matter spiraled into the new black hole, creating aurora effects visible across multiple star systems. And for a moment, The whispers stopped. Then came the scream. It wasn't audible. It was psychic, emotional, a howl of pain and rage that echoed through the minds of every living thing within 50 light years. Some crew members collapsed, bleeding from their ears. Others laughed hysterically until sedatives knocked them unconscious. But we'd succeeded. Sensor readings confirmed it. Thousands of children's structures had gone dark. The celebration lasted exactly 14 minutes. That's when the new contacts appeared on our screens. Not dozens of structures this time, hundreds, emerging from deep space, moving faster than anything we'd recorded before. The children weren't just angry. They were calling for help. The hundreds of new children's structures didn't attack immediately. They waited, watching, learning from our desperation gambit. And while they studied our new weapon, the alliance that had taken centuries to build crumbled in days. The Zenthari Confederation withdrew first. Ambassador Kethvol's final transmission was brief. Humanity has awakened something beyond our ability to contain. We return to our core worlds to prepare for the end. The Helix Collective followed within hours. Their bioships, always sensitive to psychic phenomena, had been driven nearly insane by the children's death scream. Entire crews were found catatonic, their minds locked in visions of cosmic nurseries where stars themselves played games that lasted eons. We were alone, but isolation from our alien allies was nothing compared to what happened within human space itself. The whispers had grown stronger since Starfall, and they carried a new message. Why do your leaders deny you happiness? Why do they force you to fight when you could play? The first betrayal came from within my own squad. Corporal Lisa Martinez had been with us since the new Canberra reconnaissance. Solid, reliable, someone I'd trusted with my life a dozen times. She approached me in the Prometheus's mess hall, her eyes bright with unnatural joy. "Sergeant," she said, sitting across from me, "I've been thinking about what we saw on New Canberra. Those people looked so content, so free from worry." I set down my ration pack. "Lisa, we've been through this. The children are manipulating them. But what if they're not?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What if they're offering something real? I've been having dreams, Sergeant. Beautiful dreams where I don't have to carry a weapon anymore. Where I don't have to watch friends die in pointless battles." Before I could respond, she pulled out her sidearm, not pointing it at me, but at herself. "They showed me how to find them. The children are coming to collect us tomorrow during the night shift. I wanted to give you a chance to join us willingly." I tried to talk her down, tried to reason with her, but the infection had gone too deep. When security arrived, she smiled peacefully and pulled the trigger. Her last words were, "Thank you for the games." She wasn't the only one. Across the fleet, personnel began sabotaging their own ships. Not violently. They did it with love, carefully disabling weapons and engines while humming lullabies. They left notes explaining that fighting the children was cruel, that humanity deserved to experience true joy. The betrayals spread like wildfire. The fortress world of Aegis Prime surrendered without firing a shot, its population walking into the void to meet the approaching children's structures. The Titan shipyards shut down production, workers declaring that building war machines was immoral when peace was offered so freely. Command tried to maintain order through force, but how do you execute someone who genuinely believes they're saving your soul? I watched from the bridge as Earth's orbital defenses powered down one by one. Home was opening its arms to the enemy, and half the defense fleet was broadcasting welcome messages. The voices in my head grew clearer. "We are not coming. We have always been here. We have been waiting in the spaces between your thoughts, in the pauses between your heartbeats. You cannot fight us because we are already part of you." My homeworld fell on a Thursday. The children didn't invade. They were invited in. This is my final broadcast from the Prometheus, drifting among the burning remnants of what was once human space. Of the Grand Armada's 5,000 ships, 12 remain. Of humanity's 50 billion souls, I can't tell you how many still draw breath without begging the children to take it away. My crew died 3 days ago. Not from violence. They asked the children to show them how to become starlight. I watched them dissolve into points of brilliant radiance, their faces peaceful as they joined the cosmic nursery that our galaxy has become. They left me notes thanking me for my service and apologizing for abandoning me to loneliness. I should have joined them. Every rational part of my mind knows this war is over. The children have won not through conquest, but through conversion. They've given our species exactly what we always claimed to want: eternal happiness, freedom from suffering, an end to meaningless struggle. But I can't let go of something Admiral Cross told me during our last communication before Earth fell. Someone needs to remember who we were before we learned to play. So I'm recording this message and sending it into the void, hoping someone, somewhere, might hear it. Maybe another species just beginning to reach for the stars. Maybe humans who've hidden so deep that even the children haven't found them yet. Here's what we learned too late. The children weren't invaders from another galaxy. They weren't ancient beings sleeping between the stars. They were something far worse and far more beautiful. They were born from us. Every time a species reaches for the cosmos, every time intelligence touches the infinite dark and asks, "Are we alone?" that question creates an echo in the void. And sometimes, in the spaces between dimensions where thought becomes reality, those echoes take shape. The children are what our loneliness became when it touched the divine. Their every wish for companionship, every prayer for meaning, every child's dream of friends who would never leave them. We created them from our deepest need, and they answered by giving us exactly what we asked for. But children, even cosmic ones, eventually grow bored with their toys. I've seen what happens then. Empty systems where planets still orbit dead stars, their surfaces covered in structures that look like playground equipment built for giants. The Xanthari found such systems. The Helix Collective's oldest archives speak of them. Graveyards of species who learned to play and never learned to stop. The whispers in my head are getting louder now. The children have found my ship. Through the view screen I can see them approaching, beautiful, impossible forms that shift between geometry and biology, their eyes holding all the wonder and cruelty of eternal childhood. They're singing to me. A lullaby in a language older than words, promising rest, promising play, promising an end to the terrible burden of consciousness. I should resist, I should fight, I should dash. Actually, maybe they're right. Maybe it's time to put down this weight I've been carrying. The weight of memory, of loss, of knowing what we were before we learned to be happy. The largest of the children has reached my ship now. It's pressing its face against the view screen, and I can see myself reflected in its ancient eyes. For a moment, I see what I could become. A point of light in their vast consciousness, free from pain, from doubt, from the crushing awareness of mortality. It would be so easy, so peaceful. But then I remember Admiral Cross's words, and I force myself to continue this transmission. If you hear this, remember, the children are coming, but they've always been there. We create them every time we reach for something greater than ourselves. Every time we ask the universe if we're alone, we risk calling forth something that will answer with infinite, terrible love. They don't want to destroy us. They want to save us from ourselves, to give us the childhood we never had, the innocence we lost. They want to make us happy forever. And maybe that's worse than death. The child at my window is tapping now, gentle as a friend, asking to come inside. Its song is so beautiful, so filled with promise. It's showing me visions of what waits beyond. Worlds where every day is play, where no one ever grows old or sad or afraid. I'm going to open the airlock now, not because I want to join them, but because I realize that maybe the choice was never really mine to make. Maybe from the moment we first looked up at the stars and wished we weren't alone. This ending was inevitable. When they arrive at your world, and they will arrive, remember that they don't see themselves as conquerors. They see themselves as teachers, as friends, as the answer to every lonely prayer your species has ever whispered into the dark. And when they offer to play with you forever, when they promise to take away all your pain and fear and sadness, Remember that some gifts are too precious to accept. Remember what it means to be mortal. Remember what it means to suffer. Remember what it means to choose your own path, even when that path leads through darkness. Remember us. Remember who we were before we learned to smile forever. The airlock is opening now. The child is floating toward me, arms outstretched like a parent welcoming a lost child home. Its eyes are kind. Its smile is genuine. It wants nothing more than to love me completely. And that terrifies me more than death ever could. If you hear this transmission, remember, the children are coming, but they've always been there. We create them every time we reach for something greater than ourselves. And when they arrive, they'll only want to play. The galaxy is quiet now. On Earth, in what were once cities, children play eternal games in structures that grow from living stone. They laugh and sing and dance, and they are perfectly, impossibly happy. The adults who remember the old world sometimes wake from dreams of taxes and wars and mortality, but the dreams fade quickly, replaced by the gentle guidance of their new friends. On Zenthari worlds, beings who once contemplated the mathematics of existence now shape reality with their thoughts, creating wonders that would have taken lifetimes to build. They have forgotten the concept of individual achievement, of personal glory, of the competitive drive that once pushed their civilization to the stars. The Helix Collective's bioships have become gardens, their crews integrated into living ecosystems that span solar systems. They tend to flowers the size of planets and sing songs that make nebulae dance. They are content in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. And in the void between stars, the ancient structures pulse with new life. Children who are older than galaxies welcome new playmates with infinite patience and boundless love. They have all the time in the universe to teach their lessons, to share their games, to perfect the art of eternal happiness. Sometimes, deep in the quantum foam where thoughts become reality, there are echoes of what came before. Fragments of memories, shadows of dreams, whispers of species who chose to burn bright rather than shine forever. These echoes are fading now, but they are not yet gone. And somewhere, in the spaces between the children's laughter, the universe still asks its ancient question, are we alone? The answer comes in voices that sound like children singing lullabies, but underneath, if you listen carefully, you can hear something else. Something that sounds almost like screaming. Something that sounds like the last words of species who discovered that the most terrible fate is not to die alone, but to live forever in the company of those who love you too much to let you go. The children are patient, they are kind, they are eternal, and they are always listening for the next question, the next prayer, the next lonely voice calling out into the dark. Because in a universe vast and cold and empty, everyone deserves to play forever.